A wide ideological gap is emerging between young men and women across the globe. According to Gallup data, in the United States, UK, and Germany, women between the ages of 18 and 29 are heading in the liberal direction, and more men in the same age range are trending conservative. The divide is even starker in South Korea.
The United States shows a 30-point gap between liberal young women and conservative young men. In Germany, the gap is also at 30 points and 25 percentage points in the UK. The gap in South Korea is actually at 40 points. Now, do these numbers mean that young men and women are increasingly inhabiting separate spaces and cultures? So I saw this getting a lot of discussion on social media, and then I saw some pushback saying, someone was saying, I tried to replicate this data and I couldn't, but they was apparently using a smaller data set. So obviously young people for a long time have been more liberal, and older, and as you get older, you get more conservative. But this is showing specifically a pretty vast gender gap. So even though all young people tend to be more liberal, there's this huge gap among that age cohort between men and women. And then I was seeing a lot of discussions of potential reasons for that. One being that when you have more, I guess, social conformity, you have more just people cohabiting in the same spaces, or more community-based people tend to agree. And when you allow, when you have more cosmopolitanism and more opportunities for women and for everyone, then there's more divergence in political ideology.
Are men not living in cities, and do women not live in rural areas? Aren't all communities basically 50-50 anyway?
Right. So the idea is, well, men always had those opportunities, but now that women have more social, legal, financial independence, their attitudes have diverged from men to a greater degree.
So what is it about women's independence that makes them no longer want to be culturally conservative?
I don't know.
Robbie?
That's what conservatives are asking themselves.
Might it be that it was political progressivism that enabled women to have some of those rights to begin with, like being able to own a credit card, which was a relatively new innovation in our legal system? Women weren't allowed to own their own credit cards until the 1970s in the women liberation movement. Is it possible that women see themselves as direct beneficiaries in terms of their ability to have freedom in progressive movements? Might it be that they see their ability to have control over their own reproductive choices as inextricably connected to progressive movements? I don't think that this is such a non-brainer, a no-brainer, or like a difficult question, rather the opposite of a no-brainer.
I don't think it's a difficult question. I think people are grappling with whether that will affect their lower birth rates now in many of these countries, and men and women with vastly divergent political views, thus maybe failing to cohabitate, start families, have more kids. If they have different values, that those problems are going to get, if you do think that is a problem, it's going to get more stark.
I mean, I saw a little bit of this commentary where some women were opining that because women are allowed to make their own money and have reproductive freedoms and aren't kept quite literally barefoot and pregnant, that men are now required to bring something different to the table, like likability, kindness, help around the house, generosity, joie de vivre, as opposed to simply just being able to exist with a checkbook, the way in years past women were compelled to get into unions because they had no other way to support themselves and the children they inevitably had because of a lack of access to birth control. And if you read that backward, if you kind of like reverse engineer that, you can see why there are conservative movements that have always and continue to be opposed to free access to contraceptive care, who have a war against Planned Parenthood, which mostly provides reproductive health services that are mostly not having anything to do with abortion and the like, because I think there's a very strong understanding among conservative movements that freedom for women imperils their political project. But I don't think this should be doom and gloom for everybody. I think everyone should want to be a nice person, a good person, to bring value to a relationship outside of their ability to purely provide. And that if you want women and people generally to be invested in having families, you should make it less onerous for people to do so and create childcare incentives and make childcare less expensive, not do what the Republicans have just done, which is to end the child tax cuts that have child poverty during the pandemic. Make education free, make healthcare free. the kind of things that really support a family, address the housing crisis, where so few people can afford to live in a space that is conducive to raising a family, you know, and on and on and on down the line. But I think we get to this place every time, you know, unless you are part of a political movement that wants to force women to breed, which some of these kind of incel groups online, they do make those arguments, right? That it is unfair to men if women won't have sexual relationships with them, and there should be kind of sex quotas, and women should be forced to participate in all of this kind of stuff. I mean, that's where that kind of a logic ends up taking you.
Okay, yeah, that's. I don't think I was saying any of that.
I don't think you're saying that, but you know that that's out there, Robbie.
Yeah, I also don't know whether, you know, this breakdown, men being more conservative. What's a specific policy? They just being asked, is your ideology conservative? Like, I don't know that you could show me data if I admit I was wrong if that was the case. I don't know that are young men out there trying to ban birth control or all those kinds of things. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, I'm certainly not. I want access to contraception.
Well, the Friday crew did a very popular segment recently, right, about the trad wife phenomenon, and that certainly does seem to be something online, at least, that is promoting a certain kind of lifestyle. Well, it is, but I think, you know, I don't know what their takes were on that segment, but I think most leftists don't really care. Feminism means the choices to be freedom to be able to make whatever choices that you want to make.
Voluntary.
But the problem is that many of the most popular trad wife accounts online are women who don't disclose the fact that their husbands are some of the richest men in America. And the fantasy that they're promoting of standing in front of $400 cast iron cookware and beautiful outfits with their hair and makeup perfectly done and a bouncing baby on the hip is that they are able to hand that baby off to a child care provider and make their homemade bread and their homemade cheese.
Well, they're also, let's not pretend they're not income receiving. They're the ones you're talking about who have a lot of clout and a lot of social media presence. I mean, they're running a influencer business themselves.
That's true too. But the particular woman I'm speaking of is, and it's a chicken and the egg situation. She's able to present and be successful and present so beautifully on Instagram, or TikTok, whatever, in part because she has the resources to start a channel in the first place. I think most women with multiple children also have work obligations, don't have hours and hours a day to film and edit videos and buy the lighting equipment and camera equipment that's necessary to do so.
Right. And if you're doing all those things, you're almost by definition not a trad wife. If you have vast internet access.
Yes, and that's kind of my point.
Shouldn't you be out churning butter or something?
So are you convincing women?
But that's fine. People can do that. They can do whatever they want.
Sure, but are you convincing young women that that is a legitimate kind of lifestyle choice? That the odds are in a country where the average salary is $50,000 a year, that they're going to go and meet some six-figure man. It's going to be way more than six figures, to be honest, but like some high six-figure earning man that is going to be enable them to stay at home in a beautiful house with beautiful lighting and beautiful cookware and all the child care in the world and have a really idyllic life. Because I think a lot of people would like that. A lot of women who see themselves as feminists and progressives, nobody wants to work. And most people are
parents. Not true. Some people want to work, some people don't.
Most people want to work at their passions and to do their dream, not slave away at some corporate job or, you know, in some menial position, want working some cash register somewhere. That people are not dreaming of labor. There's a whole TikTok trend that is also, I do not dream of labor. Well, so to frame like it as feminist versus trad wives, when it really is, I think socialists are all aiming for a world where we can spend time with our children and spend time in our home and make healthy meals and benefit our communities because we're not forced into coercive employment environments where our labor is being extracted for some multimillionaire somewhere while we're getting a smaller and smaller piece of the pie and our families and communities suffer. So I think that's very aligned with the progressive ideology.
You can still have all of those things you're describing. You just have to live like outside a major city. There are places in the country where homes are extremely affordable and you can make it work on a one-income salary and you can take care of your kids and you can have that arrangement. That is absolutely possible. It's just not possible in New York or California.
That's unfortunately not true.
It's absolutely true.
This is a stat, remember, we talked about a lot during the Bernie campaign. I just Googled it to confirm it's still true. It is. In no state, county, or city in the U.S. can a full-time worker earning the local minimum wage come up with a cost for a two-bedroom apartment. So
you have to earn more than the minimum wage.
Right, and I hate to break it to you that many people struggle doing exactly that. That's the problem.
I didn't say it was possible for everyone. You have
that's the problem.
Work,
and
get a good job, earn the American dream, and it can be done.
Well, it used to be more the so-called American dream used to be more accessible, at least to people who were not legally discriminated against under the law, Black people in particular, and others. And women. But the American dream did used to be more accessible. That's why I constantly cite the statistic. American workers are having money stolen from them.
None of that's true.
Not only is wage theft the largest volume.
The average home size was smaller. People had fewer, households had fewer cars on average. They had a smaller TV. You're idealizing the past, and it's just nonsense.
I'm not idealizing the past. As I just mentioned, Black people lived in an apartheid state.
And
that is not idealized at all. But for white Americans, there were many benefits, including that the average wage ratio between workers and CEOs was so much smaller.
But
American
no one cares about that. It doesn't matter if it's, yes.
Do you want me to, can I just finish this point? Like, I've been struggling with it for like 90 seconds. Americans used to take home a bigger part of their paycheck. And part of when social conservatives look back and say, well, women used to stay at home and we could have a whole family and my dad was a mailman and we got by so well. Part of that is because workers got a bigger piece of the pie, a bigger piece of their labor. So the average CEO used to earn 30 times more than what a worker made. Now they earn closer to 400 times what a worker made. So even though American productivity is up, Americans get to take home a smaller and smaller piece of the pie with women joining the workforce. That also means that there's just fewer jobs to go around. But instead of changing the way that we structure our society and saying, okay, well, the two people are going to have to live with, if two people are the wage earners, where they're going to both be able to pay for childcare, et cetera. What you have now is two people who are wage earners and one entire salary has to go to childcare because nobody can actually live on the one salary anymore in the way they used to back in the 1960s. So, you can say, oh, well, people need to work harder.
No, I didn't say that. I said that's not true.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to mischaracterize you. What did you say?
You're romanticizing the past is an obvious economic fallacy. People had smaller homes on average. They had fewer cars on average. They had fewer material goods. You're right that inequality has risen, but I mean this is a left-right difference. No, but for the right, that is not the point. For us, I don't care. Can I finish now? My point. Rich people can make, it's not about limiting their income growth. We don't care. As long as other people are better off too. You're better off relative to where you were in the 1950s. And yes, now we've unleashed capitalism. A lot of people are making a tremendous amount of money. It's not about arbitrarily reducing their success. It's about whether the gap can get bigger, but if the bottom line has gotten better, that's what we should care about.
Well, you are very protective of not reducing the success of millionaires and billionaires. They are very much interested in reducing the success of working people, and it's why they've put billions of dollars behind legislation that consistently over decades undermines labor power, which is exactly how workers were able to earn so much more relative to their bosses back in the 1960s. So let them wage that war without any pushback if you'd like, but that's definitely a war that's being waged by the top 1% against the working people of this country.
We'll have more Rising right after this.